everyone, my name is Yara and today I'm going to be doing my fall book wrap-up. I started BookTube with the intent of making a video review for every book that I read, thinking that, that's not hard at all. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can do monthly wrap-ups. That's what most people do. But you see, I don't read enough in 1 month to justify a monthly wrap-up. So now we're gonna settle with seasons because I can mentally handle that. The first book I read in fall, and by fall I'm just doing September, October, and November. The first book I finished in September was In the Afterlife by Alexandra Bracken. This is the last book in her The Darkest Minds trilogy. In the beginning of the summer, I had intended to reread The Darkest Minds before I went to see the movie, and I hadn't actually gone around to that until August, which is when the movie came out, and I never actually finished the book before I saw the movie. I still have yet to see the movie, actually. I also was really curious about rereading it because I read The Darkest Minds in middle school, and a lot of the books that I read in that time, I'm not sure if I remember fondly just because of nostalgia or because I actually enjoyed them. And so I figured that rereading them, I could figure out was my taste really bad? And surprise, these were actually really good. I found them so enticing and so engaging. I'm so glad I reread them. The Darkest Mind takes place in a dystopian world where a disease has killed off 90% of America's children. This is scary enough, but what's scarier is that the ones who are left with these supernatural powers. The government fears these kids and sends them off to these rehabilitation camps, which actually are essentially concentration camps. Our main character is Ruby. She is one of these kids who survived and has gotten these powers, and she's in one of the worst camps in America. I can't really describe In the Afterlife itself since it is the concluding novel, but if what I just said was interesting, I highly suggest picking up this series. It is amazing and I can't recommend it enough. Now, more so about In the Afterlife. This book was not a reread. I had read The Darkest Minds when it came out. I had waited a year, actually went to BookCon and met Alexandra Bracken to get my copy of Never Fade, and then In the Afterlife came out a year later and I got it, I owned it, but I only read half of it and I didn't finish it. I just remember being not in the mood for something so dark and gritty. That still holds true. The book is not happy. A lot of sad things happen, so you do kind of have to be in the right mindset to handle all that. But the second time going through it, I did not have that same sluggishness in the beginning of the book. I went through it. I really loved this book as a conclusion. I thought it wrapped everything up beautifully. I loved seeing the consequences of things that happened from previous books because like I said, a lot of stuff goes down and it really screws with our characters physically and especially psychologically, and I just loved exploring all those aspects. I said before how this is kind of a depressing book, but there is a good amount of happiness and jokes and laughter spliced into this very sad narrative because you can't help it. It's a dystopian world. It's gonna be a sad narrative. My favorite part of this entire series was the characters. They go through so much together, from antagonism to trust and loyalty to natural conflict that arises as a result of different circumstances in the future. A lot of people don't like this series because it's very character heavy and not a lot happens. I personally would disagree. I think a lot happens, but granted, I love characters, and when the characters are developed well, it makes the plot and what happens in the plot so much better in my eyes. Alright, so my camera died. I usually film on my phone, so I don't have these problems. But wow, I'm a real YouTuber now. Anyway, the next book that I read in fall was The Novice by Taran Matharu. This book took me so long to read. Not only in this time in fall, from when I started it and when I finished it, but I had bought this book 2 years ago, and I started reading it 2 years ago. I got maybe 50 pages into it max. Oh yeah, wait, forgot to explain what it was about. The book follows a blacksmith apprentice named Fletcher who one day accidentally summons a demon. In this world, there are people called summoners who have this ability to summon demons who they use to fight, pretty much. The book was very much inspired by Pokemon, so it's kind of like that. Fletcher is then sent to a military academy to train to become a battle mage to fight in their nation's war against the elves. There, Fletcher learns a lot of secrets about his country's past, about the nobility. He has to deal with a lot of cocky children of nobles, but he makes some great friends and learns how to hone his magical abilities. If you like magical school tropes, then this book is for you. That was by far my favorite part of the book, was the magical school. I do think the beginning is fairly slow paced, considering that it took me 2 times over to finally get through it. But once we actually get to the magical school, it just zooms. I was so interested and it was so exciting. I really enjoyed the characters in this novel. There is a dwarf character and an elf character that befriend Fletcher, and that squad plus a few others that they form, like, just give me all of it. I love me a good friend group. I love the fact that it was very much inspired by Pokemon and how there are like battles between the demons. Those were really exciting, and that really helped me in those times where it started to get a little slow. I also thought the world building was done pretty well. I love learning about the history of all the politics and why this war even started and stuff like that. I did listen to this on audiobook. However, I don't necessarily recommend reading fantasies on audiobook unless you have a physical copy as well, because it does get a little hard to keep track of all the names and all the different places. If you're like me, who's a very visual learner, if I can't see it, I have a hard time remembering. The next book I read was A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahereh Mafi. This is Tahereh Mafi's newest release, and it is her first time delving into contemporary. She's most famous for her Shatter Me series, which is a dystopian that came out a few years ago, and her more recent Furthermore duology, which is, I believe, middle grade fantasy. This book is about a 16-year-old Muslim girl named Shireen who is living in America 1 year after 9/11. This was a time when Islamophobia was really starting to become a huge problem, and we see the prejudice and judgment and straight out bullying that Shireen endures because she is a Muslim and also because she wears a hijab. And because of all the judgment around her, she's built up these walls and becomes very cynical, and it's very hard for her to trust other people. But then she meets a boy named Ocean James in her bio class. Through their relationship kind of makes her realize that maybe she doesn't need to put up so many walls. The fact that this book starred a Muslim character was the first grabbing point for me. There was a time when there was virtually no Muslim characters in YA, and that in itself is a huge success, given that such a big name in the YA community is releasing an Own Voices novel about her perspectives as being a Muslim person. So in terms of representation, I thought this book did a really good job. Granted, I can only speak to my personal experience as a Muslim, but there was a lot in this book that I related to with the main character. This book has so many beautiful lines and beautiful moments where Shireen is just so raw and so honest. You can really tell that Tahereh poured her heart into this to make it so authentic. There are a few scenes that are just so hard to believe, and not in a sense that like, I didn't think they happened, but just in how cruel they were and how something like this exists and continues to exist in our society. Those moments were by far the most powerful. Some criticisms that I heard before going into this book was that a lot of those very impactful and serious moments of discussion were overshadowed by the romance aspect of the book, which I agree with to an extent. I don't think it takes away from the significance of the book and the story that it tells. If you're not the kind of person who likes fluffy and almost over-romanticized or dramatic romance, then you might not like this book. For me, I thought it was cute. I thought it actually played well into the existing narrative. Oh my god, I completely forgot to mention the fact that Shireen's also a breakdancer, and with her brother and his friends, they form a breakdancing group. That was really fun. Honestly, I wish there was more of that in the book. I love the fact that it was kind of a bonding experience between Shireen and her brother. I love sibling relationships, and honestly, their relationship reminded me of me and my brother, which was really fun. So yeah, this was an extremely powerful book. I think everyone should read this. There is such an important message within this book that I think everyone can gain something from it. The last thing I finished this fall was a novella called And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer by Fredrik Backman. This is a very short novella. It was only about an hour and a half on audiobook. The story follows an old man, his son, and his grandson, all dealing with the fact that this man is losing his memories. I don't want to give away too much more than that. This book was, I think, less than 100 pages, but those 100 pages were packed with some emotion. Fredrik Backman, he is the author of A Man Called Ove, if you've read that. He has just a way of making you cry, whether it's from happiness or from sadness. For this one, leaning towards the sadness part. It's just one of those stories that really gets you grounded in what humanity is and what humanity has to offer. It really makes you think about the world and your existence and how your ideas might leave you someday. So I really enjoyed it. I'm not gonna lie, part of me wanted to read this just because I wanted a short book to read, but I'm really glad I read it. So that concludes my fall wrap-up. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you read this fall, and if you read anything that I've read, let's talk about it down in the comments. I'll see you next time. Bye!